David, we've sort of long documented the struggle of these small island nations. Are passport sales enough in terms of being able to finance their needs?
Morning. Well, I guess this whole issue, and really it ties back to the points Ali's just been making. As we see less ambition, as we see developed nations, not achieve as much as they need to in terms of reducing emissions, it's putting more emphasis on climate adaptation. What can those countries, often low-lying island nations, those are in the front line of climate change, what can they do to boost their resilience? For Nauru, we know they have this ambition, a decades-long project to move the majority, about 90% of the population, from low-lying coastal areas that face really severe issues with flooding and move them to higher ground. And the fact is there simply isn't enough financing to do that available right now. So what we're seeing is these kind of innovative, novel solutions. In the case of Nauru, also in the case of Dominica as well, that involves selling citizenships. It's one tool they found to raise some revenue, but is it enough? Absolutely not. Nowhere near enough. The strategy that Nauru has is likely to take many, many hundreds of billions of dollars, and look, what they're expecting to achieve initially is to raise about $65 million from initial passport sales.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that funding gap between rich nations and poorer nations and the challenges that these smaller countries face.
It's really something that's coming to a head, and as I said, you're sort of really going to come into more sharper relief as we see countries row back from some of the more ambition in their targets. If we think back to Azerbaijan, we had the COP29 climate talks at the end of last year. The whole thing was a huge row about climate financing. Smaller nations, developing nations were looking for about $1 trillion a year or more from rich countries. What we got in the end was a deal in which wealthy economies pledged about $300 billion a year, way less than what's needed. And in fact, the UN estimates that the gap between available financing and what's required could be as much as about $359 billion a year right now.